A wise man once said that coin collecting is basically spending money on money you can't spend. In the grand scheme of the collectibles market, coin collecting is actually one of the least volatile, most mature markets. I mean, people have been collecting ancient coins for at least since the 14th century. It's a well-structured market with the big, medium, and small players on the retail and auction environments very clearly defined. Coins are a surprisingly liquid asset, and despite myself being a romantic, I just keep telling myself that these are priceless artifacts and I can't sell them. In reality, they are, at the end of the day, a scarce good in constant demand, and therefore people can acquire them with the goal of it being an investment. So let's tackle the subject. I'm going to partition this chat we're about to have in 3 different sections. First, we will discuss the market dynamics of the ancient coin market. Then I'm going to point you to a few caveats that make this market unique and some of the risks you need to have in mind. Then we will discuss some ways we can look at this hobby under the lens of an investor instead of just a hobbyist. By the way, let me know in the comment section down below. Are you a collector who is considering investing in coins? Do you have an opinion about that? And apart from your comment, don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe, so I know you enjoyed this kind of video. But before we start, I'm gonna stall you for a second because I care about you not doing something stupid with your money. I would say the simple fact you are asking, quote, are ancient coins a good investment, already signals to me you're most likely not ready to enter this market as an investor, and you need to do a fair bit of collecting and growing as a numismatist first. Let me explain. Different from simply investing in, let's say, physical precious metals, which have very direct, easy to measure variables like the prices of gold or silver, the different types of premiums of different types of coins or bars, things you can clearly lay out on a spreadsheet. On the other hand, the ancient coin market uses other variables to designate the value of things. And these variables can be understood by a numismatist, but they aren't very tangible. Things like the historical appeal of a coin, how it translates to market demand and how to show these coins to the right audience when it's time to sell, the artistic quality of a piece in relation to its type and the cultural artistic context of when it was made, the sizes of the niches within the market and their little particular demands, the purchasing power of certain types of collectors, what these niches enjoy and what they're able to pay. I hope you get my point. And by the way, if it isn't obvious already, none of that is financial advice, okay? Just we're in the clear. Alright, after that long introduction, the ancient coin market, that old venerable entity that started with Petrarch, the father of the Italian Renaissance, buying old Roman coins from farmers that found them while they were taking care of their fields, to us today bidding online at an auction being hosted at the other side of the planet via our smartphones. When we talk about how this market actually works, a nice way to start is to look at a coin and ask ourselves, who cares? Right now I'm showing you this Roman coin, so you have to think, who cares about owning this thing? That's the core of everything. Prices are not set based on how old a coin is or even how rare it is in its absolute sense. They're set by how many collectors actually care about that specific coin and whoever is willing to put real money behind that desire. You can have a coin that is technically rare, maybe even unique, and still see it sell for $20 because almost nobody collects that little niche. On the other hand, a very common coin like an Athenian owl tetradrachma or a common Julius Caesar denarius, these can be very expensive simply because everyone, from an absolute beginner to an experienced collector, they all enjoy these coins and many of them feel like they need to own one of these things. Demand is king. How demand manifests in the case of this market, we will see it now. But once again, let's keep this short phrase in our minds. Who cares? So let's get into the drivers of this who cares factor. First one, very easy, This is a hobby mainly populated by history nerds, so historical significance. The closer a coin is tied to a big story, a famous name, an important event, the more people will want it. That's why almost anything with Julius Caesar on it is automatically more expensive than other late Republican coins. Most of his issues are not rare at all. He minted huge amounts of silver to pay his armies, but the demand is enormous. And within that micro niche that we're talking about, I mean, in our case, within Julius Caesar coins, you still get a hierarchy. So, for example, the elephant denarius tied directly to the Civil War, or the lifetime portraits where Caesar dared to put his own face on the coin. These will attract the most demand. Less exciting coins like those connected to his campaign in North Africa, so not one of his most famous episodes, for example, they're still desirable, it's still Julius Caesar, but they don't hit the same emotional note. As you see, every coin will have a certain historical significance, and then there will be some peculiarities about each coin that makes it more or less attractive. How do you know about these market realities of what's available, of how much of something is available, of its demand? That's why you need to start as a numismatist first, and then become an investor if you want, because you will understand these realities. So that was the first step. We understand that a good part of the demand is history-driven, that it has a strong component of emotional connection to a coin. Then we go to condition and preservation, or the grade of a coin. This one is easy to grasp. Considering two coins of similar type or similar number of people who care versus the offer on the market, the one in better grade will always be more expensive. And price tends to increase in a geometric proportion, the better a coin gets and the closer it is to absolutely mint state. So let's take the Athenian owl tetradrachma as an example. A rough-looking, off-center, heavily worn owl, like the one in my collection, can be had for a reasonable price. But a sharply struck, well-centered, mint-state owl with a full crest, clear features, everything can be seen very sharply. Of course, this moves into a different price bracket entirely. Same type of coin, same historical appeal, same little tingling feeling inside that nerdy heart of ours. However, it's undeniable that a well-preserved coin lets you appreciate the design and detail in a way a worn coin just can't. So, more collectors compete for a good-looking coin. Particularly spectacular coins, those that sit at the very top of visual appeal and condition for their specific type, they actually manage to trigger the attention of a different kind of buyer, a little bit of a special animal. In a famous recent case, a perfectly ordinary follis of Maximinus Daia, a coin that realistically should be a few $100s at most. It was encapsulated by NGC as finest of its type, and it pushed to $12,000 at auction. Call it madness if you want, but let's remember the who cares factor. In the case of this coin, probably two or more collectors of substantial monetary means decided they only want the prettiest of the pretty, and they were willing to push the bids to the stratosphere. The consignor was smart enough to sell the coin, the best of its type, at the right venue that has a clientele that is willing to pay these sums only for mint-state specimens. And who are we to judge them, right? Okay, after grade, we now have one of the most fascinating variables of this market, which is the style and aesthetic appeal of a coin. It is related to the skill and the talent of the die engraver, the artist who made the die for your coin thousands of years ago. Ancient coins are pieces of sculpture in miniature, and a collector should pay attention to style. Two coins of the same type, same emperor, same grade, made at the same mint, the same year, can still have very different market values because one was made by a highly skilled engraver and the other was made by a mediocre artist. I find it very intriguing because we can see this difference even with affordable and common coins. An example would be the Greek bronzes of Mithridates VI, those that feature on the obverse the bust of Zeus. I want you to focus on the head of Zeus because most of the coins of this type are, frankly, a little bit ugly. Zeus is normally shown as just a chaotic ball of hair and beard, and his face gets visually lost in this mess. But every now and then, a die engraver really understood how to sculpt the face, so it pops out from the hair. Some artists had the sensibility to add like a strong nose, pronounced brows, clear cheekbones. Maybe they were a little bit more careful with the curls, and apart from this mass of coins with just lots of hair and you can really figure out what's the design, every once in a while you find pieces of exceptional style and people pay attention to these. They sell for like 10 times as much at auction simply because the coin is very pretty. It's like if condition and style work together. One really empowers the other. Alright, historical significance, grade, style. We've discussed some aspects that affect the demand side of things, but we also need to consider the supply side, the scarcity of certain types. For modern coins, you often have very well recorded mintage numbers that clearly tell you which coins are rare, so it's relatively easy to compare a coin's rarity against its potential market and you estimate a value. We don't have, of course, production numbers for the majority of things made 2,000 years ago, and historical events could even restrict the supply side even more. So, for example, some emperors are rare because they ruled for weeks. Gordian I and Gordian II come to mind for an example. Their coins are prohibitively expensive, despite their historical irrelevance. How curious, no? This contradicts my previous argument for historical relevance. This is a very clear case of a situation where you, as a numismatist, as someone into the hobby who's already in the market and understands what people collect, you will naturally grasp the realities that, in this case, there's a current demand for these two emperors, but the demand outpaces the supply because these two guys end up being part of a set, very common set with Roman coin collectors, which is having one coin of every Roman emperor, and these guys make the list. This means Gordian I and II become the ancient equivalent of key dates. On the other hand, Gordian III, he ruled for a number of years, he issued lots of coins, and people hoarded a lot of these coins that were produced. So his silver ends up being very abundant. But most people only want one or two of his coins, so they end up being very affordable. This is a very clear case of how the supply side interacts with the who cares factor that I mentioned previously. And apart from all of this, apart from analyzing the smaller variables that dictate prices, like the little gears that move the market, we also need to understand the cyclical side of things, that most collectible markets follow cycles. And some markets might even die out completely because due to the nature of collectibles, they're tightly connected to people's emotions, some sort of connection between people's tastes, their memory of these objects. That means if a certain cohort of the population that constitutes the market for these objects starts becoming too old to collect, the market might see a drop. You see, stamp collecting is a sad example of this. We don't send letters anymore. Those who used to send them and collect the stamps for their cute little drawings, these people are aging out of the market. And I personally fear this type of collecting might die in the next few decades. My mother used to collect stamps. Fortunately for the case of ancient coins, it seems like this is a rather resilient hobby. It's tightly connected to people's appreciation of history and for accumulating wealth for precious metals, so unless we see a very strong drop in the interest for ancient history, the market should continue to be strong. An easy way of feeling the pulse of the coin collecting community is to see how the most popular coins are going at auction. Athenian owls, coins of Alexander the Great, Augustus, biblical types. These are like the gateway coins, the kind of material someone who wants to begin collecting immediately thinks of. And beginners often don't yet have a good sense of fair pricing, so although it makes me cringe a little bit to see how people overpay for these coins, it's also a sign the hobby is alive and growing with an influx of beginners. And that's good news for those who have a long-term strategy. The market will still be here in the future. Okay, so we've seen how the market behaves, how demand, history, style, and scarcity interact. Now I want to share with you a few caveats and risks you have to keep in mind. Things I have experienced in my time collecting that you should take into consideration if you're considering switching from a collector to an investor. Once more, that's not financial advice. You need to be responsible to where you allocate your capital. So to start, we circle back once more to the point I made of treating ancient coins as a hobby first, and only as you become more experienced, transitioning to a collector and an investor. How would that happen in practice? How would I personally make this transition between collector to investor as far as capital allocation goes? I would imagine the transition would happen in a similar way to how you would allocate part of your capital to riskier, non-traditional assets, when you feel your basic investment is already solid and you want to diversify. Obviously, you're supposed to do your homework of financial literacy first. After you've done the basics for your stability, 6 months to a year of household expenses and an emergency fund, a stable monthly budget that isn't eating into your savings, a well-diversified portfolio of low volatility assets, as well as riskier investments, depending on your tolerance to risk, then, and only then, after all of that, I would allocate capital to coins. The best candidates for this move would be someone who has been collecting for a while, knows how to spot a coin of remarkable quality for a type they understand well, that is in demand, and once this person understands what they do very well as a numismatist, let's say allocate 5% of his or her portfolio, the 5% that would be designated to riskier things such as, crypto. And in such cases, I can realistically see someone getting some solid results. And if they end up losing money, well, you still have a very solid safety net to ensure you're still in a comfortable financial position. The capital allocated would be different if you're actually starting a coin business, but the point I'm making here is very simple. Don't put your life savings in coins, of course. And you know what? Funnily enough, that transition from hobbyist to investor is actually much harder to accomplish than you think. As a collector, it's completely normal to fall in love with your coins. You will have favorites you'd never willingly sell. Here, for example, I'm showing you a denarius of Empress Faustina II, and I absolutely love this coin. If a situation came in which I was forced to liquidate my collection, let's knock on wood that this never happens, this would be one of the last pieces I would sell, and I would feel very sad to let it go. Having that kind of attachment is fine for a collector. The problem comes when you tell yourself you're buying as an investment, but you behave like a pure collector at the moment of purchasing something. Because the brain of a collector works like a hunter. It fixates on that one perfect coin. It does its mental gymnastics to justify stretching the budget a little bit more. Sometimes people obsess so much about a coin that they enter a bidding war for it during an auction, which results on a coin that will certainly never return the capital you invested on it in the first place. So yeah, collectors mostly focus on how good it will feel to finally own a coin. They're focusing on building a collection, not a portfolio. The investor brain, on the other hand, needs to operate in a much colder way. You need to think in terms of opportunity cost, expected resale value versus what you will offer for a coin, which means you will need to let lots of interesting coins go because the asking price for them simply isn't compatible with a realistic opportunity for profit. You also need to time the market, and you need to decide when to sell and cash in on your earnings. if you blur these two mindsets, you end up in a situation where you overpay like a collector, but then expect investor level profits later. That very rarely happens. Some collectors, and this requires some cold blood, are able to label some of their coins as keepers, you buy for love, while others are stock, you buy with the explicit idea that you sell them when the time comes, and they keep these coins at an arm's length as far as emotional attachment goes. But sadly, these guys are a rarity. The two mindsets often mix, and that's where you lose money. So, what else should you have in mind? Well, we have the boogeyman that lays on the back of the heads of everyone in this hobby. Forgeries, fakes. Now, even if you think all of the be a numismatist first and investor later, I keep repeating, is just a bunch of bogus, and you just want to start investing on ancient coins straight away, or buying and selling for a profit, you can ignore all of the other arguments I made, but you can't ignore this one. If you can't figure out what a fake looks like, or you don't know how to do your due diligence to protect yourself from fakes, one of the things I learned from years of collecting is that there will be a fake or two that escape your eye. That is, considering you're good at detecting fakes in the first place, and you end up with a counterfeit coin, you can think you just found the bargain of the century, Julius Caesar denarius for $50. I don't know, but hey, guess what? Your return on investment is going to 0%, my dude. You just can't skip the steps of being a collector or hiring a collector, because collectors, numismatists with a basic level of knowledge, they already have a few lines of defense between them and the fakes that lurk out there. The first one is their own eyes. Their, how may I put it, mental muscle of knowing what a good coin looks like, because they have seen a number of good coins and they understand the typical visual cues, they have the pattern recognition skills and the experience, and it gives them that little alarm that goes off when a suspicious coin, a coin that doesn't match what a good coin should look like, ends up crossing their path. Then the second line of defense is the skill of knowing how and where to buy coins. The knowledge on how to vet good dealers from those that maybe don't offer the guarantees of authenticity that they should offer, or they don't seem to have the expertise needed to authenticate the material they're trying to sell. Knowing how to buy ancient coins and developing a portfolio of trusted dealers is an often neglected part of the knowledge needed to navigate this market. And finally, there's the cooperative aspect of collecting. Two brains think better than one. A smart collector has a network of people they trust, so not only do they know the right people to bring their worries of authenticity to, they also know the jargon. They know how to voice their concerns, especially tell what they think is wrong with a coin. And this in turn helps them, with the help of other collectors and professionals, to come up with a verdict if a coin is good or not. You certainly won't find an investment fund manager who wants to invest on ancient coins with that kind of knowledge. That is earned by being on the field. For that you call a numismatist. So, alright, we now have an overview of how the market works, what gives these coins value, and some of the challenges to investing on that niche. Now, strategies. First, the capital. I would begin by allocating capital based on that 5% rule I previously mentioned, and we need to define where we will invest this in. Just accept you will not be able to encompass all there is out there to collect and make a profit on. It's a gigantic hobby. It's better that you just play around on the markets you are used to. If you like Roman Imperial coins, preferably stick to Roman Imperial coins. Stay on your lane, because you collect that already. You can recognize superior style, what good surfaces look like, supply and demand mechanics for that niche, everything we've already discussed. Because by knowing this market, you're able to find price gaps and the opportunity for investment. Right after that, it would be a good idea to come up from the very beginning with an estimation on when your investment will mature. This is an investment after all, so we need to know when we will want to sell. That means defining how long you're willing to hold on to any coins you find without needing to sell. With that in place, I would say it's time to start looking for pieces to buy. Here we need to once more show that discipline and that cold blood that differentiates the collector from the investor. Resale value should probably be on your head all the time, lest we start falling in love for these cute little things. So when it's time to bid at auction or buy from someone, we need to include all fees on the way in and on the way out. You will pay buyer's fees when you buy and seller fees when you sell, and the government will want its cut in capital gains when you sell it. So remember to keep these in mind when it's time to bid, and only do it when a sensible net margin remains. That means deciding on your maximum bid before the sale and not budging a single cent. It's an investment after all. So if you're participating at an auction, you're aiming for a coin and it ends up going for too much that you wouldn't be able to get a margin, well, let it go. And once you manage to get a few coins, just because these coins will be temporary guests in your possession, it doesn't mean you won't take good care of them. I've made a few videos on how to handle, protect, and store coins if you want to take a look, but basically keep them well protected, give them a nice home so you won't get any nasty surprises like scratches, bronze disease, God forbid, or some kind of ugly toning on your silver. Another interesting thing I would consider doing while holding to your coins is to curate your investment, as if it was a nice collection worthy of strong bidding. See it as if you're preparing a finely crafted collection for some fortunate collector in the future. You aren't just an intermediary. You create some value while you hold the coin. I mean, research your pieces so the auction house has something interesting to advertise about your coin when it's time to sell. Literally make the sales speech for your coin while you have it. Also, try finding provenance for your coin, so some sale that this coin was in previously. It always adds value to a coin. Keep the original pictures of the coin in your hard drive, or make new ones if you can. Anything that convinces the future market on how your coin is a great coin. Do some marketing. Sell your coin. And finally, plan the exit strategy. Plan the sale. Depending on how much capital you invest on coins, the kinds of coins you have for offer, it's important to match the value to the material you're selling. If you're fortunate enough to have high-level coins, go to top auction houses or very exclusive stores for your exceptional pieces. Well, these guys won't even accept coins that aren't fantastic, so you have some of the work done there. Then there are mid-tier dealers that will sell your more mundane coins. In these cases, it might be interesting to prepare a large consignment, so the potential earnings for the entire consignment can lend you some better conditions on the sales contract, maybe a lower seller's fee. And never forget about potential private sales. That's why being social is so important in this hobby. If you own certain coins, but you also know certain collectors who love these coins, that will certainly awaken a very strong emotional reaction to this collector, and this will most likely lead you to a very good sale. So yeah, I think I've covered all of it. You now know the basics, how the market works, the dangers, and finally the opportunities on this wonderful market, and how to transform this money you can't spend back into money you can spend, and hopefully with a healthy profit for your troubles. So, what do you think? I'd love to read your comments. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember leaving a like and subscribing if you did. Happy collecting, and I'll see you soon. Let me give a special thank you to all of my amazing channel members and Patreons for their generous support. This channel would not be the same without your help. And if you would like to be part of this list, have early access to my videos when they are uploaded to YouTube, and a series of other perks, make sure to check out my Patreon page and my members tab on YouTube. Thank you very much.